Hi, my name is Karyn Ball.
I'm Siobhain Cole.
I'm Whitney Schmidt.
I work with MAF in Papua New Guinea.
In Three Hills, Alberta.
Here in South Sudan.
And it's great to be a member of Mission Aviation Fellowship. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Limitless. This is the first part of a three-part series where we are sharing the stories of MAF women around the world. My name is Jocelyn Fry, and my family and I served in the Democratic Republic of Congo for 9 years and just moved back to Canada in 2020. I have two kids. Ruth is 9 and Pascal is 7, and my husband was a pilot when we were in Congo. And I'm so glad to be with you this evening. When we think of women in missions, we often think of women like Elizabeth Elliot or Corrie ten Boom. However, women in mission are often not highlighted, nor do we see much of what their lives and ministries look like. In MAF, images we often see are of the airplane arriving and people rejoicing. And to be fair, it can seem much more exciting than the quieter service of some of the women in MAF and missions around the world. In addition, the aviation industry is very male-centric, with only 4.9% of commercially employed airplane pilots in Canada being women. And similarly, in MAF, there's only a small percentage of our technical roles that are filled by women. However, the impact of these roles go beyond conventional pilots or aircraft mechanics. Women working in technical aviation roles within MAF challenge stigmas and demonstrate that females are capable of these jobs too, truly leading by example. Likewise, for most technical roles in MAF, there's a non-technical partner who ministers in a different way. These ministries also reach the isolated, those who feel lonely, forgotten, or unloved. As you will hear through this series, women are showing God's love through feeding and caring for homeless children, empowering widows and single mothers, and caring to care for their families, bringing emotional healing to refugees and teaching local children to read, and bringing needed change to the places they serve. Jesus' hand and feet are at work, and this is something we want to celebrate and make sure that their stories do not become drowned out with the sound of an airplane engine. Christian missions in the aviation industry has changed much since the day of Nate Saint and his wife Marjorie. It is important for us to share these stories, not only to honor female missionaries, but to show a holistic view of what it looks like to be a woman in the mission field, serving in the most isolated areas of the world, bringing the light of Christ to the darkest places in ways that we never could have imagined. I myself will be sharing my own story in a Limitless episode coming up on July 15th, and I would encourage you to continue to join in for the next 2 installments of Limitless. Tonight, we're going to be hearing stories from Karyn Ball, Whitney Schmidt, and Shiv Cole. I want to let you know that there's a questions tab at the bottom of the webinar. I would encourage you throughout the evening, throughout the videos, to type in any questions that you have, and we'll have a Q&A time at the end. You won't be able to see the questions that everybody else asks until we answer them. So please put your question in. We want to have a time of answering that. We have a variety of panelists here tonight that'll be able to answer your questions. Ray Snaith, who was a missionary with MAF for 6 years in Uganda and then went on to serve for 5 years with AirServe. We also have Whitney Schmidt, who you'll hear her story tonight, and also Shiv Cole, who you'll hear her story, are here tonight to answer your questions. We're going to start tonight with hearing from Karyn Ball. And Karyn Ball has had a passion for missions since her participating in a missions trip to Kenya in college. And now she's serving in South Sudan with her family since 2014 and continuously finds ways to show God's love to those around her. And with her passion for education and teaching, living in South Sudan comes with its challenges, but being able to show his love to people there every day make it worth it.
Hi, my name is Karyn Ball, and I serve with MAF here in South Sudan. My husband is a pilot, and I have 3 children. We have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I'm a trained teacher, but yeah, how I would define myself, I'm a passionate follower of Christ. I love my family, I love serving my family, and I love serving our community here in South Sudan.
South Sudan was the first country MAF served in Africa. Our team is made up of 38 national and 30 international staff members. 5 caravans and 2 182s in our fleet. Welcome to MAF South Sudan.
I've been blessed to grow up in a Christian home. I grew up loving Jesus and knowing all about him. Very thankful that I got to go to a Bible college, and there is when my relationship with Christ really developed and deepened, and I would say I became a true disciple of Christ and followed after him. After Bible college, I went to Africa on a 2-month mission trip with Africa Inland Mission, and I would say that trip absolutely called me into missions. I wasn't sure what my career was going to be yet or what my life would look like, but I knew that I wanted to serve him and choose a career that I could follow God in. So I went back to Canada and went into teachers college, and then I became a trained teacher. And at that point, I also started dating my future husband, Chris, who wanted to be a missionary pilot. When Chris and I started dating, before he asked me out, he asked me if I wanted to be a missionary with him. So very much of our lives together has been wanting to serve God somewhere overseas and bring our family and honor him in whatever we do. My husband, since he was a young adult, wanted to become a missionary pilot. Chris went to Prairie, which is a Bible college that trains missionary pilots. And through there, he met a lot of MAF staff, and he was really impressed with their quality and their experiences and their stories. We are passionate about the MAF standards. They have a high standard of safety and quality. But way more importantly, we've been inspired by MAF because of their mission and their vision. And it just fits in so much with our heart. And so it was an easy choice, very much a calling to decide to serve and work with MAF. For me personally, I'm not a pilot. I'm not an aviation techie. I'm not an aviation guru. I don't know the different types of airplanes. So what has inspired me to be happy and to serve and be passionate about serving with MAF is their vision. It's to reach isolated people for Jesus. As a Christ follower, that is my passion, that I would reach people for Jesus. And it's super exciting for me to be able to be in a remote area. Oftentimes, my husband and I just laugh. We're literally living in the middle of Africa, super remote, super isolated, very far from the rest of the world, very far from our family and friends. But the fact that we can live here isolated and remotely allows us to reach the isolated and remote people of the world. And I really think that's one of the things God wants us to do, to not just look closely, but to look around the world and find people that need to know Jesus, whether they're isolated or remote, and to hear about him. I became involved in the ministries that I do quite organically. They happen naturally out of the things that I love and the things that I had time for. And I would say most importantly, the things God skilled and talented and gifted me with the ability to do. The first few years that we lived in South Sudan, we lived in a compound in the middle of our city. And we were about a 3 or 5 minute walk from an orphanage that rescued street girls. So girls that were living in a slum that was actually in a cemetery. And these girls were rescued by a Christian organization called Confident Children Out of Conflict. And these girls have been rescued and are living in an orphanage. And another MAF Canada wife and I together were doing a Bible study. We both had little kids. There was nap schedules. We were nursing. We had responsibilities that we couldn't just kind of leave the house for. Our husbands were out busy and we couldn't go and do things, but we were both teachers and wanted to influence and be an ability to shine for Jesus somewhere. So we invited these street girls that were rescued by CCC. We invited them over to our home and we would have Bible studies weekly with them. And it was such a joy. It was not perfect. And slowly over time, they would listen to the Bible stories. They would ask questions. They would be willing to share their prayer requests. They would tell us how they were doing. And it was a really beautiful, organic way of telling others about Jesus right in our very own homes while we had our little kids playing around and also being part of the Bible study. Because of that, I was able to specifically connect with one young girl. And then she would come over on a different day of the week and we would maybe bake together. She would practice reading or typing. She'd tell me about her day at school. Our relationship really grew well. And over time, her 3 younger sisters would also come over. It's been a blessing. They have actually been chosen and able to go to Uganda for boarding school. We are able to raise supports with our donors and that they're able to help them pay for their school fees. So that's been, something that starting the Bible study, I would have no idea that we would have a special relationship with 4 of the girls and that they'd be now getting a better education in Uganda. But that's been amazing. About halfway through our time of living here, we moved compounds. And so this is what I mean by it just kind of happens organically and whatever is kind of in front of me. So we moved compounds out into a rural area. We're living right beside the UN, the United Nations, and a very large POC camp, which is a refugee settlement. And people all around us, they have come from remote villages because they are at war and there is conflict in their villages. So they just settled around our compound. They're living in mud homes. And they have a school here just for the local refugee kids. And it's my privilege and joy and absolute favorite part of the week to go and teach at the school. The school is simple. It's nothing fancy. They don't have many books. When I started, they were actually just under trees with wooden benches, but they have gotten some funds from the UN to build bamboo and mud schoolroom. So my favorite things to do with them is I've kind of figured out that they want to read and that they don't have books in their home. And the excitement that they get when looking at a book is amazing. So through trial and error and lots of bad lessons from me, I've realized that, they want to read. And so we have a bunch of small, thin readers that different churches have donated and with different money. And we've been able to buy these small readers, basically grade 1 and 2 level, and they're all about God. So stories about Esther or David, the New Testament. And so they're super excited to read these small Bible stories. And it's been really good to be able to teach reading through the Bible. It's definitely something that excites me and that I love to do. Sometimes when I'm going out of country, I'll ask the students, what do you guys want me to bring you back? And I imagine it's something like pencils or they want their own book. But my last class that I just taught in was grade 8. And I asked them, what do you guys want me to get you from Kenya? Expecting them to say apples or pencil crayons. But they said, can you bring us Bibles? They were quite advanced readers, and they were obviously done with these small, thin readers that I'd been letting them borrow. They said they wanted Bibles, and I came home and I was so excited to tell Chris that, my students, they want Bibles. They want to learn about God more, and they want their own Bible that they can bring home. Not that I would bring it every week for them, but they wanted their own Bible to write their name on. And that's what excites me. I can't do anything. I'm just a person, just an ordinary person. And I can only follow God's will. And the fact that they can have Bibles in their hands. I know that the Bible changes lives because God changed lives. And I'm just trusting that as they have these Bibles, that the Holy Spirit will work and that they'll come to true change in their lives because of Jesus. I hope for my ministry here, whether it's with the girls at the orphanage, whether it's with the girls that we're supporting to go to Uganda, whether it's the girls and students that I teach here at the local school, so that they would know Jesus, that they would become his followers, that they would grow up and help other people to know about Christ. I would truly, truly love to see our 4 girls from Uganda go on to be able to go to post-secondary education. That will mean a lot more fundraising for them. That will mean a lot more support, but that they would have a life that they didn't imagine when they were living on the street, a life that they couldn't even fathom when they were laying on the ground, sleeping with nothing, just sleeping on the ground at night. So for them to get an education, a hope, a future, and most importantly to know Jesus is what would excite me so much. For the students at the local school, I pray that they would know Jesus in a real way, that it wouldn't just be handouts, like here's food or here's a book or here's a pencil, but that they would truly understand that God is their provider. And whether they have much or little, that they would know that He is good. We're so blessed here to be able to teach religion in the school. South Sudan encourages teaching and talking about God in the school. It's part of their curriculum. So I hope that my passion would be that I would be a good Bible teacher for God, and that the students would come out knowing that God loves them, knowing that they can read. Reading here is an amazing skill that many people don't have. A lot of women and children can't read specifically. And it's so important to me, especially for girls, to be in school. Here, the child marriage rate is really low, as in young girls, instead of going to school, actually just get married. And to me, that's heartbreaking, because though marriage is lovely, I believe that they should have an education first and learn to read and write, and not just being seen as a child bride. So for me to see girls in school, graduating, knowing how to read, then they can change their family. Then when they do get married and have kids, they'll be able to provide for themselves and help their children. But again, most importantly, I want them to be able to read the Bible so that they don't have to believe what they hear at church or traditions or witchcraft things that they hear in their communities, but that they be able to know and understand the one true God. We love our life serving here with MAP in South Sudan. But it would be crazy not to tell you that it's difficult. It truly is difficult here. It is hard for the people of South Sudan. They're living in extreme conflict and war, poverty, lack of peace, famine, heat. So it is a very hard life for them. But not to say that it's also challenging for us. We definitely are well cared for by MAF, and we are grateful for the many blessings we have here, but it is still very difficult. Our family has been robbed. We've lost a lot of valuables. We've had to evacuate from our home here, and that was incredibly tough to leave this place so quickly and be gone for several months. I was stopped at gunpoint on the road. Our daughter has been born with being deaf in her left ear. I feel like we've had many challenges that have been extra hard by being here, overseas and far away. But hands down, the absolute only way that we can be here is because of God's calling. We understand so much more now the theology of suffering and the fact that God is not promising an easy life, but He promises to be with us in our life no matter what that looks like. God's grace, His forgiveness. I can't say all the difficulties have been put on us. We've brought many difficulties on ourselves. Our own sin, our own conflict with teammates, our own challenges have also yet been put on by ourselves. But He is so good, and He gives us so much grace and forgiveness. And because He's called us here, I really feel that He's given us the strength and the focus and the passion to stay. Even though sometimes, or some years, it feels like, what have we done? Or it feels like we're going backwards. We really wish and pray for more peace in this country. And sometimes it feels like it's going backwards rather than forwards. But because we're not putting our faith in ourselves, but we're putting our faith in God, we know that He will, whatever He began, a good work, that He will continue it. Not because of our good doing, but because of Him. So what keeps us going is God. And He helps us through every day and every difficulty. I feel that ministries like mine, like loving on kids in an orphanage or teaching children out of school, or whether it be being a midwife in a clinic or helping out in a church or doing translation work, any type of work that we do under the umbrella of MAF that's not actually flying is important, because it's reaching the isolated and telling them about Jesus. It's been amazing for our compound to be able to be a light in our community. Every morning, our pilots go out in the morning to fly, and our office staff go in to the office. And very much our community probably is around to look at us and say, what are you guys doing every day? But one amazing ministry that our facilities has done is to put a water tap on the outside of our compound. We have a really deep well here. And so to be able to put a water tap outside of our compound for the people in our community to access free, clean drinking water, where they don't have to walk for miles, but they can literally just come to MAF and turn on the tap, has been an absolute amazing witness to our community. It has nothing to do with flying, nothing to do with aviation or technology, but it has everything to do with the love of Jesus, because God says that that Jesus is the living water and that we're to share Jesus with others. So what better way than to share water with people? When I first went to the local school, I said, "Hi, I'm Karyn, I'm with MAF." They're like, "Ooh, we don't know what this is." And I said, "Oh, I live over there in that big compound." And all the kids said, "Oh, you live in the place that gives water." And I was so touched and so happy. I'm so glad they don't see us as these expats that live in fancy houses with razor wire, but that they see us as the people that love them and give them water. And I just think that's a perfect example of what MAF does. More than airplanes, more than just airplanes and technology, we can share Jesus's love, whether it's how we talk to people, how we love them, what we can share with them, or how we can give them water. I think it's good to be holistic. We can't just be only doing one thing, but we can be doing many things. The Bible says that we're a body. And so what better way for MAF to be a body, but to be doing many things for his glory.
Wonderful. What a wonderful story to hear from Karyn. For those who have just arrived, just a reminder that there is a question place at the bottom of the webinar if you'd like to ask any questions. That will have a time of question and answer time at the end. So next we're going to hear from Whitney Schmidt. And Whitney discovered her passions for missions work after participating in several short-term mission trips through her church. In 2015, while working at a Christian summer camp, she felt the call to step into full-time missions, which ultimately led her to Mission Aviation. Since then, she is faithfully completing the necessary steps so that she can serve as a pilot mechanic with an MAF program. Training as both a pilot and an AME is an ambitious track, but one that will allow her to follow God's purpose for her life and will inspire both men and women wherever she goes on to serve.
Hi, I'm Whitney Schmidt, and I'm serving with Mission Aviation Fellowship in Three Hills, Alberta at Prairie Aviation Training Center.
Ever dreamed of being able to fly? Could you see yourself dropping supplies in the most remote corners of the world? Invest in a career that can pay off your tuition. Apply for Mission Aviation at Prairie College and acquire the skills needed to serve everywhere. The mission field, it's bigger than you think.
Training journey started out when I was in my last year of high school. It was kind of right after I'd gotten my calling into aviation. At this point, I had no idea what that would look like. I had no knowledge of aviation at all. I spent some time researching, looking into different schools, and how does one become a pilot? How does that work? And so I ended up starting my training out at Calgary Flight Training Center in Old Stidsbury. And I started my ground school right away when I was in high school, but I didn't have enough money to start my flight training yet, so that kind of got put on hold. I was kind of thinking, I'm like, all right, well, God wants me to be a missions pilot. I'm probably going to be flying in remote locations, and if something happens to my plane, I should probably know how to fix it. So I was thinking maybe I should look into doing aircraft maintenance as well. So I went to St. right out of high school, And I still wasn't sure how I could afford my flying bit, so that was kind of put on hold while I focused on the maintenance. And then kind of close to the end of the first year at Saint, they had a speaker come in from Air Canada about this new co-op program they were doing. And I'm thinking, well, it sounds like a great experience, but God's called me into missions work, not large airlines. But I need some job interview experience, so I'm gonna apply anyway. And it was a pretty intense video interview, and I was a little nervous, so I recorded my interview and sent it in. And I was like, well, they're only accepting 60 students across Canada, and they're probably not gonna hire me, but it's good experience. And then they're like, hey, we want you to go on to the next stage of the interview process. And then I just kind of kept getting through. And then eventually they offered me a position at Air Canada. And so I prayed. I was like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? I mean, I don't feel that this is going towards what you've called me to, but it would be good experience. And I felt that God was calling me to take it. So I took a year off school and worked at Air Canada. And it was the night shift. And so it was about you work 5 nights and then you'd get 5 days off. And at this time, I'm thinking, well, I'm working now, I'm getting paid, and I have some time. So it'd be a great time to start my flight training. And I was a little optimistic about what I could do. I scheduled the flight training for every single day in September, which is right around when I started at Air Canada. And so there would be times where I'd go for my flight, and I'd go to work, and then I'd go back to fly in the morning, and I hadn't slept in between. And my flight instructor's like, you didn't sleep, did you? And I'm like, no, is it that obvious? And so I had to learn how to schedule myself properly. There's certainly been times during my training where I felt discouraged. It was kind of nice doing the flying and the maintenance at the same time, because I'd kind of go through these waves where I would hit a stop in my flight training where I'd feel like I'm not getting very far, like I'm not doing it well enough. I'm like, oh man, like God, I know you've called me into this, but I don't feel like I'm doing it well, and maybe I'm not supposed to be a pilot. I'll just focus on maintenance, and I'll just be a maintenance person because I can't fly a plane. This is too hard. And then I would get to a point in the maintenance training where I would kind of feel stuck, and I'm like, oh man, this isn't going very good, but the flight training's going well, so maybe I'll just be a pilot. I don't know about this maintenance stuff, God. I think I just added that in there. You didn't really call me into that. And I would just kind of cycle through in these weird waves, and I'd always be like, all right, well, I'm doing good at this, but well, now I'm doing good at this. And so then eventually I started to recognize this pattern, and I'm like, maybe I should just be a little less hard on myself and just focus on learning and growing, and know that it's like a hard process, and just to give both my best effort. And another thing too that really kept me motivated during these rough times, or when I was feeling really discouraged, I was just looking forward to what I feel God was calling me to. Because if God calls me to be a mission pilot, He's going to prepare and equip me. And when I was feeling discouraged, I would just think about flying in these remote locations and just helping people and just bringing hope through the use of aviation, and something that I really love and am passionate about. There's something magical and surreal about just being in the air and just looking down, being like, I was on the ground, but now I'm up here beside these clouds, and that's pretty cool. And being able to do maintenance and flying at the same time has been amazing, and just getting a more well-rounded idea of how the plane works and how to operate it better through knowing both. And I'm very passionate about encouraging women to follow their dreams, and just following God's calling and what He's doing in my life, because it's just been incredible to see how God works. And it's scary at times, it's pretty hard, but if you just trust in God and you follow that he's called you to do, he's always faithful, and he always brings it through. And when it seems like it's not possible, or when it seems like there's this huge roadblock in the way, I'm like, oh man, I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. But if you just like trust in God, and he just makes a way where there is no way, and it's crazy. It's pretty neat to see how following God's will brings you right where you need to be, even when you think, no way, that can't happen, that's not possible. Because it's a little cheesy, but it's true. But through God, everything is possible. And I've been seeing that in my own life and experiencing that. And I'm just so excited to see what he has in store for me and for MAF in the future. It's an exciting journey, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. The impact I hope to have as a pilot and mechanic on the mission field is to ultimately bring glory to God through my work. God has called me into aviation and brought me into this and showed me my love for aviation before I even knew about it. And I don't know what could be greater than using that passion, using the skills and abilities that he's given me to further his kingdom. And growing up in Canada, I've been pretty privileged. I had all the advantages with education, having a loving family, never worrying about where food was going to come from or where I was going to stay. And I think it would be incredible to use all the resources that have been available to me to grow my skills and abilities to the best that I can, to use them to help people who have not had the same opportunity. And MAF does so many things around the world through aviation, including bringing supplies, doing medevac charters. They do humanitarian efforts. But something I really love to see is the youth that saw MAF and were so inspired, and they went to Canada or they went to the States to do more education, to do their higher education, and come back and help their communities in that way with what they've learned. And I just think that's so incredible, just the inspiration that these people have through MAF and the work that we do there. And I think that is what the impact I would like to make, is just to bring hope and life to people through aviation, which is just follows perfectly with MAF's slogan, Flying for Life. So as a female in a male-dominated industry, there have certainly been some obstacles that I've had to overcome. Before I started into aviation and piloting, I never really noticed that before. Like, in Canada especially, women and men are pretty equal. There's usually equal opportunities, and I never really thought too much about having such a vast gender difference until I started my pilot's training. And I was like, wow, where are all the ladies? Where are the ladies at? And yeah, it was just quite a shock for me to see that. And even in Canada, less than 30% of the pilots are female, and that surprised me. And I didn't really feel too discouraged going into aviation as a lady. I was pretty stoked. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna be a pioneer for ladies in aviation. But there's definitely been a couple times where I've felt that I didn't quite belong, or there have been times when I've been kind of made to feel a little bit less just for being a woman, and that was not something I'd really experienced before. One example of that, when I did my private pilot's license, I got a scholarship through COPA, and so I went to Kelowna to get this award, and they had, before the ceremony, there was just an open booth where there was a bunch of people from different organizations in aviation, and each kind of had a booth, and you could go around and talk to people and learn about their organizations and what they had to offer. And so me and my sister were going and walking around and trying to talk to these people, and it was pretty clear that they didn't think we belonged there. No one specifically said anything, but you can kind of tell, like, oh, where's your dad? What are you girls doing here? And we're just like, oh, we're interested in knowing more about your organization. And we just didn't really feel like people wanted to talk to us or tell us about them because they didn't think we were for real, I guess. And there was this one booth, this one guy actually said to us, he's like, you girls don't look like pilots. And I'm like, well, actually, I am doing my training, I got a scholarship. And he was just like, oh okay. And so eventually we got pretty discouraged, and we're like, well, don't feel like we're learning much or getting much out of this. So we went and sat in the hallway, and my dad comes, he's like, oh, well, why are you just sitting here? You should go talk to people. And we're like, no one's really taking us seriously. And this guy said this, and he was all like, what? And like full Papa Bear mode. And we went over and talked to him, and me and my sister were like, oh no, what's happening? And a little while later, Dad comes back. He looks all proud of himself, and he's like, hey, Whitney, how would you like to fly home in $1 million plane? And I'm like, what? Really? He's like, yeah, I talked to the guy, and he felt bad, and he offered to fly you home in his Piper Mirage. And I'm like, wow. Well, I guess some good came out of that. But yeah, and then even working at Air Canada, most of the people were really good and accepting, but there was definitely some of the older staff. They kind of didn't take as much interest in the training and trying to show you stuff, and you could kind of tell that they were kind of wondering what you were doing there. But overall, it was pretty good. I think one of the obstacles too is just my own self-doubt. And because of all the hype, and they're all like, oh, women in aviation isn't really a thing. And I was like, well, do I belong here? Should I be here? Or when I'm not doing as well, I'm like, maybe I'm not good enough to be here. But I think overall, it's getting better. And I have seen more girls come into aviation, which is awesome. When I did my first year of SAIT, I was the only girl in my class, and that was a shock too. I was like, what? There's like 32 students, and I'm the only girl in this class. That's crazy. And then when I came back to SAIT after working at Air Canada, there were 3 girls in the class. So that was really encouraging to see, even in just like 2 years, that there's more girls coming through. And I think that in the future, we're definitely going to see a lot more. And there's a lot of representation for girls in aviation, which is awesome. And yeah, I think it's really important for girls to know that this is an option and that they can do it, and to know that even if an industry is more male dominated, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't try, and that they should dream big, and they should go for what they want to do. And if God's calling them to something, they should definitely go for it, even if it doesn't seem like it's possible, or that it might be hard. And it will be hard, but I definitely think it's going to be worth it. And yeah, just so awesome to see this video series, and hopefully that promotes more girls to follow their dreams.
Thanks so much, Whitney. The last video that we're going to watch this evening is from Siobhain Cole. Siobhain Cole grew up in a military community in England and Germany, and after university, she followed in the footsteps of her parents and her grandfather by joining the Royal Air Force. She works in logistics and airport management. She worked in logistics and airport management in London, Scotland, and the Falkland Islands. And after leaving the Air Force in 2013, God led her to MAF, where she could continue to use her operations and logistics skills for a greater purpose. She has been in Papua New Guinea since 2014, using her experience in various roles within the operations department.
I'm Siobhain Cole. I work with MAF in Papua New Guinea. I've been in Papua New Guinea for 7 years, and it's great to be a member of Mission Aviation Fellowship.
MAF has bases in Papua New Guinea. High mountain ranges and heavy cloud formations make hazardous flying conditions on many routes. Medical, educational and evangelistic outreach by dozens of missionary organizations has multiplied the missionary force many times over, keeping a constant pressure on MAF to greatly increase its service.
So when I left university, I was looking for a career that would give me some challenges, would be a little bit more than just earning a paycheck. And I actually joined the Royal Air Force following in the footsteps of my parents and my grandfather. I served in the UK and Falkland Islands for 7 years. And then my contract came to an end with the Royal Air Force. And with the skills and the training that I'd received there, including an additional degree in logistics management, I wanted to use my knowledge for something that would be like a force for good in the world, you know, very warm and fluffy. I didn't like the idea of just going to do a job that earned a paycheck. My dad tried to push me into working in London, where he said, oh, you can double your salary, but that wasn't really appealing to me, working all hours and never getting outside the city. I wanted to do something that would do some good in the world. So I applied for a few different charities. I applied to the Red Cross, to a few missions and charities, some Christian, some secular. I was just looking for something where I could use my skills, because when I was in the Royal Air Force, I was a logistics manager specializing in airport management. And I'd received a lot of training and experience in that area, and it was quite specialist. So I wanted to be able to use those skills of aviation logistics again in the world. It seemed pointless to go back to square one to start something completely different that I wasn't qualified in. So I applied for a few different organizations, and MAF was actually introduced to me by my mum. She had heard about MAF through flyers and through various communications previously, and she suggested that I apply to them. And what I really loved about MAF was that I could do my specialization of aviation logistics within MAF, because it's an aviation organization. In other organizations, they're a bit more general, so I would have been more logistics and administration. So I applied to MAF and was accepted to come to Papua New Guinea. When I first arrived here 7 years ago, I was coming as the ground operations manager, part of the leadership team. And it was a real eye-opener. It felt like, from my military experience, it kind of felt like 2 promotions in one, with the cultural shock of working somewhere so very different to what I was used to. Missions is pretty much the opposite end of the scale of military. So I had a very steep learning curve. Coming in as one of the bosses in charge of 40 staff in around 10 different locations, as a 30-year-old female, was an additional challenge. And I was warned before I came to Papua New Guinea that being so young and being female would be a great disadvantage working in a culture that was very patriarchal. Before I started my job, I spoke to one of the senior members of my department, one of the senior guys who would be working for me, Papua New Guinean, who had worked for MAF for almost for about 25 years. So almost as long as I've been alive at that point. And he said to me that he was so pleased that I was coming to be his boss and coming to take on this really important role, and that he would support and encourage me. And I was so blown away. I've been warned that, you know, being a woman would be so challenging, and then to be given that welcome, it was so encouraging, and it just confirmed that this is where I'm meant to be. This is what God wants me to do for the future. And I did that job in Papua New Guinea, ground operations manager, for almost 4 years. And then I went on home assignment and actually went to get married, because 2 years after I came to Papua New Guinea, I met my now husband. So we left, got married, came back. We were only out of the country for less than a year. There's a lot of logistics involved in getting married, I have now discovered. when I came back to Papua New Guinea, there was a need for my husband to fly in Telefomin, which is a remote community where we now live, where I'm sitting in my pantry today. And unfortunately, they needed him to fly in order to keep the aeroplane flying. And I was not able to do my role of ground operations manager from Telefomin. So I had to step out of that role. Fortunately, I just recruited a really good Papua New Guinean guy as my deputy, so he was able to be promoted up into that. So for the past 3 years, I've been working in a more of a support role to operations from Telefomin. But just the start of this year, they asked me to step back into the deputy role from my old position, so deputy ground operations manager, in order to support the guy that I recruited, because unfortunately they hadn't been able to recruit a deputy for him, and it's just too big a job for one person. So I've been in and I've been out, and back in management again, but it's really great to be in Papua New Guinea and to be directly supporting 40 members of staff, Papua New Guinean staff, because people is my strength, and working with the national staff is so encouraging, so challenging in so many ways, but I really love it. So I'm really passionate about working within ground operations here in Papua New Guinea because I'm wired to be a people person. I don't do very well on my own for very long, and I did struggle the past 3 years being here in a support role, but being in a very remote support role where I don't get the opportunity to interact with our staff very often. So being back as Deputy Ground Operations Manager gives me the excuse to actually visit our staff in person and to be able to encourage them. We are very blessed in MAF in that we have a very diverse group of people from all over the world. Here in Papua New Guinea, we've got about 40 expat families and around about 100 members of Papua New Guinean staff. And we all have to work very closely together to make the mission work. Within ground operations, it's mostly Papua New Guinean staff. In fact, I'm the only person who's not Papua New Guinean. And to be able to encourage them is really humbling as well as enjoyable, because most of them they really care about the mission of MAF. They understand the need of the bush people. Most of them were bush people at one point. Many of them have a village that they came from, which is in a bush location, and they're one of the blessed few that's been able to get education and go to the towns and then be able to get a job that pays reasonably well. So they know the needs out there. They've seen them. Some of the needs are of their own families, in fact, people that they're supporting. So to be able to help them is really eye-opening because they understand it far better than I ever would. Also, I come from such a different perspective from them. You know, I've used computers since pretty much since I could write. My dad worked in computers, so we were quite early on getting a personal computer at home. Our Papua New Guinean staff, most of them only saw a computer when they started working for MAF, or probably several years, or maybe even a decade or two after they joined MAF. So to be able to support them in using the IT skills that are necessary is really helpful. We are an aviation organization as well as being a God-focused mission. And that means that there are business requirements. We use email, we have online software, which enables us to track our aircraft and send messages to our pilots. We have an online booking system that we use at every base to track what programs the planes will be flying and track the details of our passengers. All of our ground staff at our 11 different bases have to use this software. And for most of them, it's completely new. So one of the things I do is do a little bit of training and mentoring to help them to improve their own skills so that they can do their job better. Because they want to do a good job, they want to serve God, they want to serve the bush communities, but they lack some of those skills which we in the West often take for granted. You know, most of us can pick up a smartphone or turn on a computer, and we can know how to find the internet. We can know how to load a new app, those kind of things, which our staff here, they don't know. We have smartphones in Papua New Guinea. In fact, it's very odd going to some very bush locations and you'll find someone comes up to the aeroplane wearing a grass skirt and holding a smartphone. It's a very strange sort of juxtaposition of cultures. It does exist here, and it's great that it does, because it enables us to use our audio Bibles, which we sell to bush communities, and also the Wi-Fi Bible, which the pilots take with them when they land at a bush community. They turn the Wi-Fi Bible on, and anyone with a smartphone can stand within about 50 meters and download Christian resources, music, videos, the Jesus story. There's all sorts of resources, and they're all free, so they don't have to buy credit on their phone, which is extremely expensive. They have all these resources, and you have one person with a smartphone, and they can then share those resources with everyone in their community. It's just one of the great things that I love that we can do. That before I came to Papua New Guinea, I never would have thought that you'd have a person with a grass skirt with a smartphone, that we could give them resources that could bless the community, that could share the word of God in a way that I never knew existed before. So in my role, I'm very blessed that I get opportunities to go out and visit the other bases that we have in Papua New Guinea, and that allows me to visit some of the bush communities en route. I remember one occasion where I was able to, I was flying from to visit a base, and the pilots got a call over the radio to say that there was a medical evacuation flight needed. Someone had been in the bush, probably hunting, and had been attacked by a wild pig. He'd been attacked quite badly. The pig had gored him, and he needed to get to hospital quite quickly. Now, we were going to be flying over the airstrip almost directly, so it was a very small diversion for the plane just to be able to stop, pick up this individual, and then take him to where we were going, where there was a hospital, so that he could get the emergency treatment he needed. Being a young man who was out hunting, if he lost the ability to use his leg, he would become a huge burden to his community. It would totally destroy his life. So the fact that we were there so close to be able to help him was amazing. We landed the aircraft at an airstrip called Blackwara, and this young man was brought to the aircraft on a bush stretcher, and I use the term stretcher very loosely. It was a few logs with some leaves attached between it, and he was being carried by about 6 of his friends on these logs and leaves up to the aircraft. And because we did not know we would have a medevac that day, we did not have the medevac stretcher on board the aircraft. There was one at the base that we come from, there's one at the base we were going to, but we didn't have one on board. So he was brought on board on this bush stretcher, and him and the bush stretcher were strapped to the aircraft. And it was just amazing to see that these guys had been in the middle of the bush with nothing but their bush knives and maybe a box of matches, and they'd been able to use the skills that they had to fashion a stretcher to be able to carry their friend safe and securely out to the airstrip. And that would have been several hours carrying him. To be able to see them come and see the community come together, knowing that they'd sent runners ahead to the person who had the radio, because there's one radio by the airstrip, that's it. So someone would have gone ahead to call on the radio to say, we've got this guy, he's had this accident. The accident may have happened in the night, but the runner got there in the morning and managed to get through on the radio to our HQ to say, yes, we've got a plane and we can send it to you right now, no problem. Hey, this is amazing, you don't have to wait. So then we were able to land, and the whole community came around, and they were making sure this guy would be okay. He was put on board the aircraft with someone who would support him. All he had with him was the clothes on his back. No one had gone home and packed a suitcase. They don't have suitcases. They barely have a spare set of clothing. But that was him and his friend were on board, and they were off to hospital, and we were taking them, and I was there on board with this guy in a stretcher who had this chunk missing out of his leg from wild pig. Pigs here, they're not the cute little pink pigs. We're not talking babe, we're talking a wild boar kind of thing. And we were able to take him to hospital. And that was just a normal day's flying that I happened to jump on board from. Being a manager, I often get stuck behind my computer and I can get bogged down in the details of our staff need training, our staff need receipt books, our staff need uniforms, those practical day-to-day things, and I can easily forget about the reason that the staff need the training or the reason that they need the uniforms. It's in order to get the aircraft flying, so we can literally fly for life, literally save people. And it's incredibly humbling that I'm involved in that. I'm not a pilot. I occasionally get to see what's going on, but you know, that medevac didn't happen because I was there. That medevac happened because the plane was there. But in my work as Deputy Ground Operations Manager, in the work that my staff do as base managers, as traffic officers, they enable that plane to get flying, to be out there. You supporting MAF, you praying for us, you donating to us, you enable that work to happen. You enable that medical evacuation flight to happen. And I can so easily forget about that, stuck behind my computer. But we're all a part of this machine that is helping and serving these people in the remote communities, which is such an incredible privilege. If you're a professional woman, whether it's working in aviation or logistics or any kind of industry, if you're thinking about the possibility of joining missions, do it. I just really encourage you to take that leap, start that adventure. Just make some inquiries, contact MAF, contact other mission organizations. There's such a need out there. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, and that is so true on the mission field. It takes a lot of guts to leave your home country, to leave comfortable Western society, to go to the other side of the world, to try something new, to face challenges that aren't known, to work in different cultures. But it's such an incredible adventure, and honestly, you get more out of it than you put in. And I would really encourage you. We need managers, we need teachers, we need accountants, as well as pilots and engineers. There are so many jobs that need to be filled. We need administrators. We need people who are willing to do what's not on their job description. There are so many things I do here that are outside of my role of Deputy Ground Operations Manager. They're not on any job description. They're supporting the mission, supporting the work, helping our neighbours, hospitality, those kind of things. You can't just come to the mission field and say, this is my job, this is what I'm doing. There's so many other needs. Get involved in the local community is such a blessing. And you can do those kind of things as much as you have capacity to do. So I just encourage you, it is an adventure, it is a challenge. Take it, go for it.
Wonderful, thanks so much for sharing, Shiv. We have a few questions we're gonna have a time of question and answer now. If you have any more questions, please put them in the question section now. One of the questions that we'd like to ask is actually to Shiv. Shiv, feel free to put your video on if you can. And just wondering about what sort of, if someone was looking to do a role similar to yours, you talked a little bit about what training you would do, but what sort of training would somebody need to do a role that would be similar to what you're doing?
That's a bit of a tricky one to answer because my training was through my time in the Royal Air Force. So you couldn't just do the courses that I did. I was a logistics officer in the military, so therefore I was very blessed with getting a lot of training. And that's why I would encourage women who are already professionals, who already have skills, training and experience, to use what you have where you are. It's a bit different if you're high school level or college level and you've got your whole world ahead of you. Then I would say look at what you're good at, look at what you enjoy, look at what your passions are. But there are so many professionals in the world already who already have skills and experience. Use that try and develop the skills that you have. Look to take on additional training courses. Can you expand your experience? And don't be afraid to go and work for the commercial organization to get that experience if your aim is missions in the end. You know, when I joined the Air Force, I didn't think I want to be a missionary, but I'll go and join the military to get some experience and then I'll go and be a missionary. In fact, at no point in my experience did I ever feel like God said, Siobhain, I am sending you to be a missionary. It didn't occur to me. I joined the Air Force because that seemed right at the time. And then when I left the Air Force, I was looking for a job that used my skills. Like I said in that video, I applied for both secular and Christian organizations. I wasn't looking to become a missionary. I was looking to use the skills that I had. Unfortunately, God is a lot smarter than me, and he directed my path the right way, that I ended up becoming a missionary. But honestly, I've been with MAF 7 years now. If you'd asked me 8 years ago, Siobhain, do you want to be a missionary? My answer probably would have been, no, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shiv. It's great to see you.
I'm so glad the internet is good enough that I can join you from Papua New Guinea. It's 11 o'clock
amazing.
in the morning on Friday here in PNG, and I'm very grateful. Normally our internet would not be this good to actually stream, so praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. That's right. That's right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Shiv. That's such a great story. I love hearing about how God can use the different parts of our paths that we don't even think about. Like you said, it's like, I didn't want to be a missionary, but God's like, I'm going to take you here, and then I'm going to take you there. Whitney, I have a question for you if you wanted to turn your video on and show your lovely face to all of us. Just wondering, you talked about how when you entered into aviation, didn't quite realize the gender differences. So just wondering who inspired you, or who continues to inspire you as you go through your training to become a pilot mechanic. Annie, sorry.
Yeah, well, there's a couple people that come to mind. Not that I necessarily have known personally, but just like stories of female pilots that I've heard that I would like read and find really inspiring. The first one, one of my friends in high school, her mom gave me this book called West with the Night, which is a biography of Beryl Markham. And so she was a freelance pilot in Africa in like the 1930s. And like it's telling stories, like she grew up in Africa, and like her dad was training racehorses, and like she was attacked by a lion, and through like certain events she ended up like flying, and she was just like really awesome. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's so cool. That's like exactly what I want to do. And maybe not getting attacked by a lion, but the cool flying parts. And then also even just in MAF's own history, with Betty Green being the first official pilot of MAF and co-founding the whole organization. And it's just really cool to see how these women, like even back like many years ago, were getting into aviation. It's just really inspiring to me.
That's awesome. I know as I get to know you, Whitney, and continue to hear your story, I just am continuously inspired by you. Another question that we have here is just how do we support these amazing women? And the first story we talked about Karyn Ball and the ministries that she's involved in. In the chat, we have links to the missionary pages of Karyn Ball and Whitney Schmidt and Siobhain. And so feel free, I would encourage you to visit those pages, copy and paste those links. Through there, you can go and see each of these people's newest newsletters to be able to read more about what they're doing, and to be able to sign up if you'd like to continue to hear about that. And then another question, Ray, if you're around, would be if people are looking to join MAF or learn about MAF, maybe if they're not technically a pilot or a mechanic, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so it starts with a conversation, as Whitney can testify to. I mean, it all started with a conversation Whitney and I had, and just kind of exploring, you know, where she felt God leading her, and so that's the first step, and just seeing where it would be a good fit within the MAF world, and looking at skills and training and that sort of thing. But I mean, ultimately, you know, we're looking for people that have a heart for missions and a heart for people, and especially you know, the isolated people in the world. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. I have another question for Whitney here. It says, if you could give girls advice who are hoping to go into aviation, what advice would you give them based on your own experience?
That is a good question. I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, the reason I went into aviation mostly was because I felt called. And then once I got into it and found out how much I loved it, I was just like, yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else now. I love it so much. But if there's some ladies that are interested in aviation and they have a passion for it, I would say just go for it. Or if they feel that God's calling them into it, the best thing you can do is just, like Ray said, just like reach out, talk to people. It starts with a conversation. You can just like go to a flight school or go to Prairie Aviation Training Center. And yeah, I don't know, just having the courage to step out and follow what you're passionate about.
That's awesome. Thanks, Whitney.
If I could also lead on from what Whitney said, if there's any younger girls out there who don't know what they want to do, maybe you're watching this thinking, this sounds interesting, but I'm not sure I have a passion for aviation, or I'm not sure if I have been called. I don't really know, I'm just exploring, I'm just interested. You know, when you have those careers fairs and you're just looking around at every option, do that, explore, find out information. It's great to pray and ask God what his plan for your future is, but he gave you legs and he gave you internet access in Canada. Use it, go and find out, go and contact people like Ray and find out more about MAF, or contact other mission organizations, or contact other professionals in other industries. Reach out and find out, because even if you find out that actually maybe aviation isn't for you, but in that process of discovering, you've maybe crossed something off your list and you've made your list of future options smaller, which might help guide you. That might be the way that God directs your path to help you to figure out what he wants for your future and what your next step is, because every step, every day can be an adventure. You've just got to have the courage to take that step forward, move your foot, and God will be there with you no matter what you do. Go for it. Everything can be an adventure. Go for it.
Yeah, well, Shiv, as well, I was going to, if you wanted to stay on, I was going to say that that there's so many more roles in aviation outside of pilot mechanic. Like you do the ground ops. I don't know if you could like list off the top of your head the variety of other roles that are involved in aviation that aren't just being a pilot or being an AME.
Oh, you put me on the spot now. Okay. Well, I think one of the first ones I have to mention, obviously I'm a manager, but there's administrators. No job gets done without administrators to help them. Never undervalue the wonder of good administrators. Accountants, we always are short of accountants. Teachers, there's always local schools, international schools, mission schools, which are short. We are really struggling in Papua New Guinea right now in finding teachers to be able to support the schools, which they're not run by MAF. They're just here in Papua New Guinea. And one of the main reasons that families leave the mission field is education for their children. If there isn't a good high school option, then a lot of the homeschooling mums struggle once they reach sort of grade 9 stage for their kids. So if we can get more good teachers, particularly high school teachers as well, then that will enable parents to be able to send their kids to a local boarding school where it's just maybe an hour's flight from where they live, rather than across an ocean, which is too far, understandably, for a lot of people. And then we also have a lot of people who work within math in supporting roles. They're not in specific jobs, but they do things like, we have a furnishings committee that makes sure that our armchairs and sofas and bed frames are all up to scratch, that we have curtains in our houses, and we have hospitality roster, because when pilots need to overnight at other bases, it can be a little bit onersome for them to have to take a meal with them for the evening. When they're in the plane all day, it'll defrost, so they get fed when they get there. There's people who organise who's going to feed people when, who looks after the transit houses so they've got somewhere to sleep, so they don't have to come in after a 10-11 hour day of flying and then find the bedding and make a bed. Just little things like that, looking after the cleaning of the houses. We have people who work for MAF in so many different roles in PNG that used to be vets, butchers. There's one guy who used to teach circus skills. We have ex-military, we have teachers, we have speech therapists, we have dietitians. There are so many different jobs, and whilst there are no jobs here in Papua New Guinea anyway for dietitians, as far as I'm aware of, their knowledge, their skills have been used to, has been very useful. My neighbour here in Telefomin, who's a dietitian, gave a talk to the pilots at pilots meeting about the importance of a correct diet, taking the right kind of food with them for lunch to make sure they have energy to last throughout their day, make sure they're having a good breakfast. It's something you wouldn't ever think of. Aviation, dietitian. Her knowledge has helped people go, oh, actually, I may have been 30 when I came to the mission field, but I'm fast approaching 40 and I need to think about keeping my blood pressure down. So just those kind of skills are so useful. And the speech therapists helping their colleagues who are working in different languages. So we have people, we all work in English language here. We all learn the local trade language of Melanesian Pidgin, but we've got Dutch, Swiss, Norwegian, Swedish, there's quite a few, and German. And for those parents who are teaching in their native language, perhaps they're at home, they speak Swiss German, their children are learning their lessons in German, they're speaking to their friends, their expat friends in English, and they're speaking to their local friends in Pidgin. So some of those kids can have some slight, they're just delayed developmental issues, nothing significant, but having a friend who's a speech therapist, could they just have a chat over a cup of coffee and they go, oh, no problem, this is normal, that is normal, my education tells me that. And suddenly that mom who's a bit worried that her third child, that was only 2 when they came on the mission field, is developing more slowly in their language skills than their elder 2 children, she then has the peace to know this is normal, this child is working in 2-3 languages. It is understandable that they are learning a little bit slowly, and actually give them a few years and they'll probably overtake their siblings, and it's a great opportunity that their kids have. So there's so many skills from people's past lives, which, even though MAF is an aviation organization, are still useful in so many ways.
Yeah, I think the person that taught the circus skills, I think that's a pretty significant skill set. Whitney, there's a question about your cat, the hanger cat, and maybe you could explain the significance of what the cat's name is.
Yes. So when I first started working at PATC, it was like my first day there. I was in like Calvin's office. He runs the airport stuff, and he was like, do you have any questions? And I'm like, can we get a hanger cat? And I was kind of expecting like, no, like some kind of, I don't know, some response. And I was like, all right, like I've got my arguments ready, and we're like prepared to like fight for this hanger cat. And he's like, yeah, I love cats. And I'm like, great. And so my sister ended up bringing me a kitten when I told her that I got permission to get a hanger cat. And so I named him Pratt. And so anyone in the aviation industry would know there's this really well-known engine company called Pratt and Whitney. And so, yeah, he's my Pratt to my Whitney. And we're like the dynamic duo, and he makes me so happy. I love him so much.
Always need a hanger cat. Well, we'll answer one last question here, and then we'll close up our time. Shiv or I could answer this as well. Is how did we break our news to our family about going away as a missionary? Shiv, you went single, and then probably went back to your family, and then took your husband and left again. But growing up as a missionary kid, your family was probably used, as a military kid, you were probably used to traveling around. So I'm not too sure.
Yes, having joined the military pretty much straight out of university, and both my parents being in the military, we've moved around a lot. Home for us has always been where our family is, not necessarily a specific location. So my parents were not entirely surprised that I decided to go to the other side of the world. And when I told them about it, my mum is a Christian, my dad is not. My mum was extremely supportive. My dad was a bit confused because I had my military experience, and to be an officer in the Royal Air Force, you have a lot of opportunities when you leave. Even only a few years that I was in, there was a lot of things I could have done. So to choose to go and do something that would be so challenging with less pay than I was on before just didn't quite compute. But my dad is wonderfully supportive and extremely encouraging, despite perhaps not understanding my reasons. But it was still really hard when I first left. And yeah, I was single when I first came to PNG. And that, knowing that I was going so far away, and when I was in the military, I hadn't done more than 6 months away from home. And I left my parents at Heathrow Airport, and I said, see you next year. And it was January. And I knew it would be more than a year before I would see them again. And I was really excited and pumped up because I had this massive adventure ahead of me, going to a part of the world I'd never been to before. I'd never been so far away from home, never even been to Australia. But it was really tough for my parents, and there were a lot of tears at the airport, knowing it would be so long before we could see each other, and not knowing exactly how good the internet was going to be. Even now, Skype video calls are challenging because our internet is not nearly as good as this has been today. And even now it's 2 years in between seeing my family whilst I'm here. And that's after being here for so long, having been here 7 years now. In my first year, I missed Starbucks, and I missed Pizza Hut, and I missed going out for sushi and all of those kind of fun things. Saturday afternoon, just going around the mall window shopping. I missed all of those things. I don't miss any of those things anymore. In fact, I think personally my pizza is better than Pizza Hut. Now I've learned to make pizza myself. But the one thing that being away for so long does really hit is your relationships, your family, your close friends. It's wonderful to have technology, and how the missionaries of 100 years ago coped when they packed everything into their coffins and set sail around the world. They were incredible pioneers. We have this access to technology, but it's not the same when you can't reach out and hug people, especially when your friends and family go through painful things. We've had a loss in my family just recently, and it's been really, really tough to not be able to be there to share in that grieving process. And that is one of the greatest challenges, is just the distance. We form close friendships here. We can form very close relationships. Friends become like family, but they can never replace your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your best friend from college. So that is a great challenge, but it is still the sacrifice is a sacrifice, but it is worth it.
Thanks so much, Shiv. That's such a great answer to that. We went a little bit long, so don't be afraid of coming back next time. We'll try to stay a little bit more on time for next time. But I just want to thank you so much to our panelists. I want to thank you so much to everybody who came and attended. It's just been such a big blessing. Our next series for Limitless will air on June 17th. Same link, same time, maybe a little bit shorter. Please encourage you to come. We'll have 3 different stories of amazing women who work in various aspects around MAF, and share it with your friends, with your family, or anybody else who would be interested in joining. So I just want to thank you very much, and I hope that you have a great evening.